Right, it's recording. Welcome to MichaelDB's podcast number one, 90s Heroes. I'm calling it. Yeah, talking about my childhood heroes. My childhood, God, I'm nervous. I'm going to be brutally honest. Throughout, not that I'm ever not honest, I'm pretty nervous doing videos again, starting this podcast, number one episode. You can call it the pirate. What am I talking about? The pilot episode or the testing the waters. Whew. But I'm pretty nervous. Anyway, let's crack on. I'm going to be talking about my childhood heroes from the 90s. The 1990s was my childhood. I would have been 2 when I entered, 12 when I left. So that's pretty much your entire childhood, right? And my childhood can be defined by two things back then, and still, you know, um, I was a wrestling fan for a very long time after the 90s and still defend Rangers to this day. So, yeah, I've just spoiled things there. The two things that defined my life back in the 1990s during my childhood, as someone toots outside, I instantly regret opening the windows. But it's a nice summer's day here in Aberdeen, so yeah, you need the windows open. Anyways, so many distractions in life. It was WWF Wrestling, Glasgow Rangers. Yes, I know. Why do you support Rangers if you're from Aberdeen? I don't know is the honest answer. I guess I just like the colour blue slightly better than red. Like their top, went with Rangers. And could you really blame me in the 1990s? Rangers were amazing back then. And I stuck by them. People could say, oh, you were glory hunting in the 1990s. But I stuck by Rangers. I've had much joy since 2012, with the exception of that one season where we were by far the better team. I know other teams in the league had excuses about why they didn't win the league that year, or one team in particular, but Rangers were by far the best team. So, you know, um, yeah, and wrestling touched on that. Um, WWF was my life for a very, very long time. WWE, WWF as it was known back then. Still prefer to say WWF. And I think it's because WWF brings back so many happy memories. WWE, especially today's WWE, is there's not much happy memories there. Not much happiness at all there. Not much joy. But we're not talking about new wrestling. We're talking very much talking about old wrestling. Anyway, let's get on with it with the heroes. Uh, I'm going to talk about three of my all-time favorite wrestlers, and in my opinion, the three greatest wrestlers of all time. And I'm going to talk about the greatest Rangers. Oh, should I say my favorite Rangers player of all time? And that position he held was goalkeeper. And why would I name a goalkeeper my favorite Rangers player of all time? Well, because goalkeeping was what I loved to do when I was younger. It was my favorite position. I was good at it, dare I say. Maybe the best in my generation, in my area. Um, that's for other people to decide, obviously. But in my humble opinion, I was pretty good, and I was inspired to be in goals by the individual I'm going to talk about at the end of this video. So let's get into it. Wrestling. Uh, Hulk Hogan. We lost him last year. Um, the greatest wrestler of all time, and arguably, it's him and another wrestler I'm going to talk about later on in the video. It's between them two who's my personal favorite, but Hulk Hogan, I can point to putting wrestling on the map in the 1980s, early 90s, mainstream, pretty much because of Hogan and Vince. Hogan was the star, Vince was the promoter, it's been told many, many times. And then he did it again in WCW in 1996. I believe it was the 30th anniversary of him turning heel yesterday. As of recording this video, not sure when this podcast one will be out. Uh, but Hogan, he made wrestling cool again in 1996. My memories of him, absolutely, he was towards the end of his initial run, was the era of wrestling I got into, the golden age. Absolutely loved the golden age of wrestling. Hogan, Warrior, Jake the Snake Roberts, Savage, Demolition, so on and so on. So many great characters, larger than life. One of the best entrance shots in wrestling was the one at WrestleMania 8, that long camera shot leading up to Hogan coming out. It felt so genuine and real, and it's used many, many times in the WWE entrance, montages of Hogan, Titantrons, and all that fun stuff. Um, And then there's that moment when he came back in 2002. I was all on board for Hogan coming back in 2002, and he stole the show at WrestleMania 18. He had no right to steal the show during the Attitude Era. Now, the Attitude Era was starting to fizzle out by 2002, but The Rock and Austin were still the biggest stars of the company. And here's Hogan coming in WrestleMania 18 as the bad guy. Rock is booed out the building. It's been told many times over, but it was. I watched it live. It was one of the many WrestleManias I watched live, and even watching it live, I don't think I realized how big I was really rooting for Hogan. I was so glad he was back. Brought so much, energy to a show that already had a lot of energy because it was during one of the boom periods. But he stole the show that Andy stole the show at WrestleMania 19 too. Yeah, point blank, the greatest of all time, in my opinion. I can point to putting wrestling on the map and making it cool again in two different eras. And he was underrated in-ring wrestler too. I think Bret Hart rates him, what, a 3 out of 10 or something in the ring. That's nonsense. I like Bret too. Bret would be in my top 4, top 5. I'm a fan of the Hitman too, but uh, yeah, Hogan, in my opinion, was actually underrated in-ring worker. He did what he had to do, and you know, I'm not going to say I've seen any of his Japan matches. I've heard that he's pulled out some moves there too. I haven't seen any of them, so I can't comment on that. But I believe he could pull out. I mean, look at that suplex he performed with the Big Boss Man off the steel cage at Saturday Night's Main Event. That was incredible, and he bumped. I've grown to like or appreciate John Cena a little bit more over the years, but he bumped better than John Cena. He took a rock bottom better than John Cena. Underrated in-ring performer as well as being just the biggest star wrestling's ever seen and one of the biggest stars in the world at the time, at his peak. Next wrestler I'm going to talk about is Shawn Michaels, my long-haired inspiration, if you will. At one point in life, it was kind of you didn't really admit I didn't admit I was a Shawn Michaels fan to begin with because he was so flamboyant but I loved his look and his in-ring work. Like I was a fan of his in-ring work before WrestleMania 10, where he became a household name in the wrestling bubble, anyways. Um, but looking back at one of his overlooked performances, in my opinion, was at the 1994 Royal Rumble. He was unbelievable during that Rumble, and he was arguably the MVP of that Rumble match. That whole show was very memorable, and Shawn Michaels was just unbelievable. He had two runs. You could argue which one was better. I'm going to favor the 90s. I just think, from his charisma and the look and in-ring work, I think all add up to his best time period. Right. I do want this to be raw and unedited, but unfortunately there was somebody in their car playing music. It was a hell of a tune, to be honest. Zara Larson. Um, I like that song too, but no, I don't want it in this particular podcast recording. I was talking about Shawn Michaels. So yeah, I think I favour him in the 90s overall, but I was in attendance for WrestleMania 25. I might have mentioned that a few times, and yeah, he stole the show. Stole the show. Speaking of WrestleMania 25, the reason I was there in the first place, or wanted to go there in the first place, was when I heard about the next wrestler I'm going to talk about. My favorite of all time. It's neck and neck with Hogan as far as favorites go, but overall, I'd have to say Stone Cold Steve Austin's my favorite of all time. He was the main part of the star of the Attitude Era. I know some others, not mentioning names, Triple H, but some others will try and rewrite history or try and make it out they were a bigger deal than they really, and they're trying like, you know, I was a kid during Austin, later early teens during Austin's entire run, and he was the man, the star of the Attitude Era. Yes, The Rock became a bigger name in Hollywood later on, and The Rock, it's been talked to death that if Austin was 1A, Rock was 1B. Yes, later on they positioned The Rock, in 2000, somewhere 2001, and going into WrestleMania 18, and they were positioning him as the number one face. But for the majority of the Attitude Era, Austin was the guy. Even in his absence, you could feel he was still the heartbeat of those Attitude Era Raw shows and SmackDowns. Um, and yeah, very he had everything, didn't he? He could work in the ring. He had charisma for days. He could still, I bet he could still cut a damn good promo right now as I speak. Stone Cold Steve Austin. I think my favorite memory of him was at WrestleMania 17. That walk down the ramp to the disturbed version of his theme. One of the greatest, maybe the greatest WrestleMania entrance of all time. There wasn't two OTT like what some people do, but that like that I that was wrestling at his peak. I don't think, as much as I say, Hogan's the greatest ever, and he is, in my opinion, wrestling was at its very peak at WrestleMania 17. It just everything clicked. I don't think it will ever be as good a show as that. Austin Rock main event in that show. I watched it live. It was the first actual WrestleMania I watched live. Before I would watch the WrestleManias the next day, or you know, a week, or maybe a few days later, I was up watching WrestleMania 17, and I remember halfway through the show thinking, this is the greatest wrestling show I've ever seen in my life. And a lot of people still look back at that show as wrestling as it's very peak, Austin Rock. And another reason I say that specific time was at the wrestling at its best, because in the golden age had many characters, many larger than life characters, but arguably the biggest, Hogan was the star. In the Attitude Era, we were gifted with two stars, Austin and Rock, and that's why I give the edge to this specific time period of being the greatest wrestling period, because we had not one but two genuine household names. Um, so yeah, there you go. Austin, his rivalry with McMahon, the greatest feud, greatest storyline in wrestling history. He had it all, absolutely had it all, and when he entered the Rumbles, you knew it was game on. You knew it was game on. Like, crowd would, how many times did the crowd erupt for his entrance? Um, and I was, I never got to see. I got to see him give somebody a stunner at Aberdeen House Show. He was at Aberdeen House Show for some reason. I didn't think he would turn up for an Aberdeen House Show, but in 2005 I was there, and I was obviously cheering him on. And I think it was JBL got a stunner or something. A long time ago now, going back 21 years. So I saw him give someone a stunner. I've seen him at WrestleMania, the Glass Break, WrestleMania 25 came out in his buggy thing. He's kind of a yeah. There was no slip ups in that entrance, unlike this WrestleMania 41 botchamania, so to speak, entrance he had where he bashed into the ramp, and then that woman had that delayed fall after it. That was yep, that was rather ridiculous. But Austin, as I say, it's between as far as favorites go, it's between him and sometimes I feel like Hogan. Sometimes is my all time, and but I think overall Austin's my favorite. I'll go with Hogan, the greatest ever. But you can make an argument for Austin being the greatest ever. Huh? Definitely can make a case. It's very close between them, in my opinion. I know people will point to others being the greatest of all time or their favorites. Yeah, so that's wrapping it up on the wrestling side of this video. Let's get into Rangers. Let's talk about Andy Gorham, who we lost actually 4 years ago this month. He whenever I'm down, one of my happy places to go to is Andy Gorham ruining Celtic's day type videos. The saves he pulled off against Celtic and Aberdeen and teams like Leeds United. A lot of people argue that I think it was the season 92, 93, or it was 91, 92 season. I can't remember which one, but it was the season where Rangers won the treble. They beat great performances in Europe that season too, and a lot of people point, even non-Rangers fans point to that season being the greatest ever season for Rangers. It's hard to argue, but I slightly favour more the seasons that had specifically the 9 in a row season, which had Paul Gascoigne in the team, Brian Lydrop, who's my favourite outfield Rangers player of all time. He's just a marvel to watch. Whoa, Brian Lydrop. And they had Ali McCoy, Super Ali, Mark Hateley making a return at some point during the 9 in a row season in March. But Gorham, both all those seasons. I don't think there was a season where Gorham wasn't on top of his game at Rangers. Even the season where Celtic unfortunately stopped the 10 in a row attempt, and there was a game where Gorham made a couple of mistakes. But what season does a goalkeeper not make mistakes? And the goals Celtic scored against him that season, you would have had 2 or 3 goalkeepers. No one's stopping some of those goals that Celtic scored against Rangers that season. But the season prior, especially a game that happened on November 14th, 1996, my mum's 40th birthday, funnily enough, and it was a very memorable night for myself too, as I was watching Celtic versus Rangers at Celtic Park. It's a game I go back to quite often. It's my happy place. Whenever I'm feeling down, I go to that game. And the saves Andy Gorham was pulling off in that game, it was commentated by Andy Gray and Martin Tyler. In my opinion, the best ever commentating duo, not just for Sky, but all time. My humble opinion. Nobody was better than Andy Gray as a colour commentator, so to speak, as the wrestling term goes. But not even a fox running on the pitch could steal Gorham's spotlight. It had everything in this game. Gaza missing a penalty from Stuart Kerr, I believe the goalkeeper's name was. I believe he was only 22, the Celtic goalkeeper at the time. Saved a kind of weak penalty from Gascoigne. Brian Lydrop got the goal, and then just the icing on the cake. 85th minute, Pierre Van Hooijdonk steps up. Now he's been denied by Gorham. Gorham made an unbelievable save against him in 1995. I think it was again at Celtic Park during a 3-3 Celtic Rangers game. He made a save that he shouldn't have been able to make. It was anyway, but this was my definitive moment as a football fan. I've never felt a moment of stress, of excitement, all rolled into one. watching this game and that penalty moment where Gorham saves a Pierre Van Hooijdonk penalty at Celtic Park, 85th minute. Celtic at a time were just top of the league, slightly above Rangers. I think it was by goal difference. And the Rangers, thanks to basically Gorham's performance during that game, and of course Brian Laudrup's goal, uh, they leapfrogged Celtic that day. And I remember I recently watched a VHS of Gorham talking about this moment. Somebody had uploaded a VHS of Andy Gorham, the goalie, and he said at the end of the game, Paul Gascoigne came up and gave him a hug because he felt, I guess, so embarrassed that he missed that. He felt he let Rangers down, missing that penalty, and Gorham kind of saved Rangers that day, and Gaza and others were so thankful for Gorham, and not just for Rangers. He was, in my opinion, Scotland's best goalkeeper too. I know Dandy Don fans and other fans will point to Jim Leighton. That's their opinion. And Jim Leighton, very, very good too. But I'm going with Gorham every time at Euro '96, and he was the number one at Euro '96. And there was one game where Gaza had that wonder goal, that iconic goal against him, but the other two games, he kept a clean sheet and put in a strong performance against Holland. And that Gaza goal, I mean, that would have probably been a crime to save that anyways. So we'll let him off with that one. And he had spells at Motherwell later on. Underrated spell at Motherwell. He pulled off he kind of irritated Celtic during his Motherwell run as well. Or so a lot. I think there's a 1-0 game where Celtic won just the 1-0, and Gorham was pulling off save after save, and it took a Henrik Larsson penalty for Celtic to win that game. But he was kind of past his prime by then, arguably, and then he was still pulling out tremendous saves. And then he ended up at Manchester United at one point. Uh, he only made 2 appearances, I think, but yeah, incredible career, incredible character, and as far as Rangers players go, I'll always, if anybody asks me who's your all-time Rangers player, Andy Gorham every day of the week. Outfield, it would have been, Brian Laudrup or Alan McCoist, who's probably a lot of Rangers fans' favourite player of all time. I've got all their signatures too, including the new manager, Derek McInnes, who came back to the club, who used to play for Rangers. So yeah, there's my heroes in the 90s. I'm going to wrap this video up here, I think. Hogan, Michaels, Austin, and Gorham define my childhood, so to speak. And I don't worship celebrities these days, but I'm not going to rewrite history. Looking, they were a large part of an era of my life, and I have very fond memories of watching wrestling, watching Rangers. Not so much watching wrestling now, not so much watching Rangers now. That season last year was like it was like the greatest movie ever. With all the twists and turns, with the absolute worst ending you could possibly have. But anyway, no more sour grapes from me. I'm over it now. Hope England win the World Cup and take the spotlight off Celtic, cheating to win the league last season. Did I say something there? Anyway, uh, we'll see. We'll see if there's an appetite. If people enjoy this podcast, let me know in the comments below. If you want some more of these podcasts, let me know. I think I'm going to enjoy this, and I hope others do too. Take care, folks, and see us all again very soon, I hope.